Thrilled to be joined by Peter Cowan, board certified clinician, owner of Sunlight is Life. Peter, you have written a fascinating series of articles surrounding the NFL and emissions. Uh, I, can you give the elevator pitch in terms of what this is all about?
Yeah. So the elevator pitch is that the 49ers are statistically one of the most injured teams over the past decade. The fans call it the curse of Levi's Stadium. I'm not a very close NFL follower these days, but I'm a fan. I did grow up in the Bay, and the they won so much in the 80s and 90s, and the fans have been frustrated for the past decade. So there's a lot of theories as to why their injury rates are so high, and none of them really panned out because other teams have those things too. And the only thing that I could find that was different was this electrical substation that sits right behind their facilities and likely emits a very strong AC magnetic field. And they're in those facilities 6 days a week, I believe, during the season, and most of the year, except for maybe 2 or 3 months in the summer, based on the research that I did. So it's a lot of exposure.
Yeah, they're there when they're not on the field and they're working. They're in those facilities. Um, Obviously, injuries have been a constant with the 49ers, even more so at a rate above the NFL average. Uh, Specifically, some soft tissue injuries. Specifically, the latest being George Kittle going down in the wild card game. Um, and you've gotten a lot. You the article's kind of gone viral, and certainly got even more play after the wild card game. Kendrick Bourne gave you a shout out in the press conference.
Yeah.
Now, laughing, but you know, when things like that are said, especially when a player's shouting it out, there's some truth, or there's some seriousness to him even shouting that out. So, you've gotten some heat in terms of this from the conspiracy theorists out there. I just wanted to give you the platform first of all to debunk that a little bit.
Great. Yeah. I also just about that the joking. People joke about things that they're not allowed to talk about seriously. You can get away with joking about anything, but if a player were to say, "Hey, I think this substation is a problem," that's going to be a problem. So I don't know what his motives were, but the fact that he was joking about it to me is a good sign. I was so happy to hear that.
There's seriousness behind all jokes, I think.
Right.
There's so
Yep. So I was happy to hear that. But just regarding the conspiracy theory, anybody who actually read my article, I did not imply any conspiracy whatsoever. I laid out scientific mechanisms, and this is actually the result of my clinical work that I was doing last year with clients who suffer from a condition called MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. And it comes in often in a triad with two other conditions. One is called EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and the other is POTS. I, I'm not good at saying this one, but it has to do with blood pressure issues when you stand up and getting postural orthopedic tachycardia syndrome. You get like heart palpitations and such, and they're tied together. And the common explanation is that EDS, which is a hypermobility condition, is genetic, and that people get the other two because of that. But my research showed me that actually MCAS breaks down collagen and leads to non-genetic of EDS, which has gone up so much in the past 20 years, really. And so you there's no conspiracy whatsoever. I might be wrong, but I did clinical work with clients who suffer from this condition, and a lot of them got better. It's very hard to treat, but then I immediately recognized it in the 49ers who suffer from soft tissue injuries, but not only are they soft tissue, they're primarily many of them anyway, non-contact soft tissue injuries, which is exactly what happened to Kittle last night. And it's such a bummer, so tragic. I really hope that he heals quickly.
And to further just kind of not debunk, but I mean, you are not blaming the 49ers in all this.
I don't think the 49ers have done anything wrong at all. And uh, they are following the substation was there. You know, they didn't put it there. It's the substation is legally compliant, and that doesn't mean that there couldn't be a lawsuit or something, but they did nothing wrong.
Why do you believe the guidelines that are there for the substation in the first place? How do those guidelines miss the real risk?
So that, you know, that's, I'll try to keep it without going too long. The guidelines emerged after World War II. My understanding, I'm not an expert on it, but I did some research when people working with radar were actually burning themselves from the heat of these electromagnetic fields. And so levels were determined, basically a cutoff at a certain power level. You're not going to burn yourself, then it's not going to be a problem. So the regulations were built around the idea that with non-ionizing radiation, which is so electromagnetic radiation is a spectrum. Right in the middle is light. On one side is ionizing radiation, and that's things like X-rays and gamma rays. And we all know that you don't want to mess with that because it's going to damage your tissue directly. The non-ionizing does not damage it directly. So it was assumed that it was safe. And so we wrote regulations around that. And which is not to say that there weren't legal battles around this, because in the 60s and 70s, when we were building out our power infrastructure and creating these high voltage electrical lines, there was huge legal battles around it. And the primary scientists who fought against this were Dr. Robert Becker and Andrew Marino, who was a biophysicist. Becker was an orthopedic surgeon, and he eventually went on 60 Minutes regarding another electromagnetic health issue and basically said the Navy is going to install this massive antenna in Wisconsin and it's going to cause health problems to everybody who lives there. And the federal government pulled all of his contracts and basically canceled him overnight. And he would have been probably a Nobel Prize winning scientist. So, so they canceled him, and the regulations have stayed the same ever since.
I mean, the first step that comes first step that comes into things like this, when we hear about things that we don't understand, is the first step is, all right, we call it quackery, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
the second step is then all the things start happening behind the scenes, and then it becomes, all right, now maybe we need to embrace this for real, as maybe lawsuits begin, or a groundswell begins with this. This kind of discussion reminds me a lot of the early days of concussion discussion when it comes to the NFL.
Yeah, I think there is some similarities to this. I think there is some important distinctions though, because the basically the conditions that the NFL players are subject to is actually the conditions that all of us in the world are now subject to, primarily in modern high income countries with really advanced infrastructure. So it's not just the EMF from the substation. I read that the Niners just did a $200 million upgrade to their wireless in their facilities, and it got millimeter wave and C-band wave. It's all over the bleachers. People want their connectivity. It's the blue light from the LEDs messing with people's circadian rhythms, which I actually think is probably the biggest factor, and that the EMS from the substation would be just like the straw that broke the camel's back on top of that, because these soft tissue injuries are happening across all sports leagues, and it's not just the 49ers. They just happen to have it worse.
You've dealt with some of these issues yourself, and that's what kind of got you into this field in the first place. From a symptom setting here, what do you start seeing happening on when uh, issues start popping up? It feels like a lot of phantom symptoms at first that can't be diagnosed per se, but that your own body, something's wrong.
Yeah, the problem is that the effects are, first of all, they're nonlinear, so they're not going to affect everybody the same way at all. And then everybody has their own weak points. So if they do affect you, they're going to affect each person differently. So it really depends on where your weak point is. And uh, so for me, it was like a lot of fatigue and kind of the brain fog, and just having trouble sleeping. And then I started having heart palpitations when I did any sort of exercise, pain in my soft tissue. Um, those are the main ones. Immune issues too, like getting sick all the time. Um, and for other people though, you might see like weight gain. You might see more soft tissue injuries. Obviously, it could go so many ways.
I mean, I'm
Oh,
dating myself a little bit here, but it also reminds me a lot of almost like an Aaron Brockovich situation,
yeah.
where we see results happening, nobody wants to own it, and but the reality is there. These things are happening.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, and I think another good one is the cigarette causing cancer issue. We knew it for decades. Everybody knew it, and was it a conspiracy? No, it was just, it took getting those lawsuits to go through and the liability to be cost more than the alternative, and so there's some interesting stuff around that with the telecom companies. It's my understanding that the insurance companies will not insure them for this kind of suit, but that's something that I haven't looked into myself. It's something that I've heard from people that I trust. So I would say verify that one. But there have been some promising lawsuits, and I think RFK actually, before he was with the current administration, won a pretty significant suit having to do with the rollout of 5G. So there has been some progress, but I personally don't necessarily see it going anywhere because, unlike cigarettes, everybody's addicted to their devices and they love them, and our economy is built on it. And cigarettes, a lot of people loved them, but it wasn't the foundation of our economy.
In terms when we were talking ahead of this, you you almost brought this up in when we're talking about the soft tissue part of this. You brought it up in terms of a microwave. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, you're basically getting dehydrated. So if you ever put like a steak or something with a lot of moisture in the microwave, you warm it up, but it gets kind of hard and dry. It's no good. So it's a similar effect. Our bodies are, you know, the statistics is like 60 to 70% water by weight, but by molecular count, it's 99 or more percent. And collagen specifically is like 99.6% water by molecular count. And the water is an essential part of the structure of the collagen. It's not just it's not just there for hydration. And so these any sort of non-ionizing radiation is going to it's essentially, we have mitochondria in our cells which create energy and they create water. And if they're disturbed, instead of creating water, they create something called a free radical, which leads to damage to the cells and it leads to less water. So we get kind of a double whammy there.
And we're basically talking about we're talking about these emissions, the continued exposure that they have working out there, you know, pretty much every day, the continued exposure that they have, potentially drying out the soft tissues to the point where
Yeah.
they just become as hard as a steak in a microwave.
Yeah. I mean, think about, like, have you ever left a rubber band in the sun? It goes from being nice and bendy to just, it just snaps immediately. It's the same thing. Collagen is an incredibly strong substance when it's cross-linked correctly and has and it's hydrated and everything. It's insanely strong. But when it gets compromised, it can't really handle those loads.
We talked about Kendrick Bourne shouting out the power plant and pretty much referencing the article in that. Uh, I've seen
Yeah,
folks like
folks like.
Kurt Benkert, uh,
Mhm.
reposting your Twitter post, your X post. Um, any other former players, you know, league insiders, anybody else kind of reaching out behind the scenes looking for more information from you on this?
The closest I've got is a couple follows. John Feliciano is following me. I think Will Compton is, and he is that his name. He also retweeted me and said, or sorry, reposted me and said this should have 1 billion views yesterday, and I think that really kind of jacked up the exposure a lot. But other than that, no, nobody in any official capacity has gotten in touch, and I think it's unfortunate because because I'm board certified clinician. If anybody does talk, the conversation is going to be covered by HIPAA law, and I'm legally not allowed to share anything they say. So they can come to me safely, and it's not a problem.
You're wanting to talk about this. That's why you're doing this
I do.
interview. You didn't put this out there for clicks. You put this out there because of research that you did.
I had no idea it was going to take off like this. I had no clue. I was I was visiting family in the Bay Area for Thanksgiving, and I had seen Chase Senior's post in October about the substation. And I remembered I went to a Niners game a couple years ago with my daughter and my father-in-law and my nephew. And I remember seeing the facilities and thinking, oh, that's interesting. Why would they put that here? It just, life gets busy. And so when I saw that post from Chase Senior, I was like, you know what? I know a lot about this issue. I got a Gauss meter. I'm just going to go measure it. So my dad was driving me to the airport, and we to kids and go to In-N-Out Burger, and um,
Shout out In
I
and
got
Out.
we love In-N-Out Burger. Maybe they can sponsor me. Uh, it's right by the airport, and but we got to the stadium, and I had trouble. I had a plan of where I was going to go, and like it didn't work out, so we had to go behind the stadium. There's a park and ride lot, and I finally found a place where I could do the measuring. And right when I did, my dad started having some heart palpitations, so I had to take him to the doctor. And so it was just kind of a side thing that I did. And then I wrote the article in December and kind of put it to the side because honestly, it was a side project, and I needed to be developing my applications and stuff. And wound up having a conversation with my mentor actually, and she's like, "This is a great article. You should publish it." And so after the holidays, I just put it out there. And the time was impeccable because they had those 3 injuries in that game against the Seahawks where they lost, and they lost a player for the postseason. I don't remember his name, but it was a pretty clutch player. And Purdy had the shoulder injury, and I don't remember the other one. So I think the timing was right. But I don't know anything about marketing or social media. I'm just kind of post what interests me, and it seems to be working out.
You the the talk around it has and this kind of what we talked about off the air as well. You may not hear officially from the teams, but the players are commodities. Their
Mm-hmm.
careers are so short that
Yep.
they are looking for any advantage, any
Yep.
way to whether it's prevention, whether it's rehab, whether it's just overall care. So, I mean, is there anything that the players themselves can do to protect themselves from these emissions?
Yeah, and I think in my third part of my essay, I mentioned that NFL is actually kind of ahead of the curve on some of this stuff. I don't know if they have the same theory behind why they're doing this stuff, but they're on the right track. Certainly, like the Niners have, I think they have a contract with Juve, which is a red light panel manufacturer or company, and they have a whole red light room. And red light basically makes the mitochondria produce more water. So there's a lot of things that we can do to both reduce our exposure to these emissions and to kind of mitigate the harm if we can't reduce our exposure.
If this is ignored, what do you think the long-term costs will be to the players, to the franchises that face these issues? Because yes, we have this specific substation location, and but I mean, like you said, we're talking about uh, these are the things that they're exposed to just by normal cell phone usage, and we have our cell phones, with us 20 hours a day, so
Yeah.
I mean, what if not addressed? What do you think the damage is if it's just not addressed?
I mean, I'm not a doctor and I don't follow these kind of injuries too closely, but I did a little research, and that kind of like Achilles tear that Kittle went through, like that can be a career ending injury. I don't think in this case it probably will be, but um, just looking at like shorter careers and long term pain. And I think about myself, everything that I went through when I was sick, like that's not any way you want to live. It's not a good quality of life. And so, in a way, though, I was lucky, and somebody who has a soft tissue injury is lucky because they have an acute injury that they can address and realize that, hey, there's something going on here that I need to fix. Whereas someone else is going to, be 45, 50 and have a stroke or a heart attack or something, and they're just going to be gone, and they never knew there was an issue. And so I just think long term, it's all of us. It's not just the athletes. And I'm really glad this came up because I think athletic organizations are really ahead of the curve on taking care of people's health. In and I know like players get injured and there's issues too, but like they're really doing their best to keep their players healthy for the economic necessity of the team.
I mean, we're talking about billion-dollar, $5 billion valuations, and these players with hundreds of $1 million contracts. They are commodities now.
Yeah,
Not that they ever weren't before, but I mean the dollars behind it are bigger than they've ever been, and
yeah,
that's only going to increase.
yeah.
How do you address the critics who say that this is fringe or unsupported?
You know, I almost just don't even want to address them because why are they? I think the more interesting question is why are they so quick to dismiss without any curiosity? I think that's a lot more interesting. So I think there's a lot of reasons why they might be so quick to dismiss. There's a lot of money in this stuff, and a lot of people have just a stake in another view of how things work. And then other people are just threatened by anything that's outside of the very mainstream scientific consensus. But when I say scientific consensus, I'm talking about institutional science
Sure.
consensus. Because if you, like I said, my paper is full of citations to peer-reviewed literature that tell a different story. So I can't read other people's minds, but I do think it's really interesting that it's just been dismissed without curiosity by so many in the mainstream media.
And you're not out here saying the typical sort of prove me wrong statement. You're saying I've done the research. Here's what the science is behind the numbers that I've been able to gather, and do do with it what you will, right?
Yeah. And the amazing thing is, and also just to add, I've done clinical work with people and helped them get better, and myself. Um, the amazing thing is, if anybody was just wanted to ask me what what can we do to make things better, most of the things they can do are going to be good for them regardless if the EMF thing is an issue or not. So even if I'm wrong, the things that I would recommend would just be better for them in general. So it's a very low risk thing. It's pretty much no risk. But the risks that they happen to see are the ones of like, well, what if we validate this crackpot and our doctors are saying something different and the government and blah blah blah, and we don't we don't want to rock the boat. And I get that, it's understandable, which is why I think it's more likely that a player would reach out on their own, and that's why I'm kind of saying, look, I'm HIPAA compliant. I can't say a thing. If you talk to me, it's not going on X. It's not going anywhere public.
But you're available to talk.
I am. My people can find my phone number online if they want.
The in terms of, is the damage already done in terms of what these guys, like let's say the
No.
26 49ers went through? It can these sort of things be reversed or
Yeah. Uh,
improved?
I should have given you a picture of me in 2019 of how unhealthy I was. Yeah, this you can anybody healing is always possible, and there's multiple routes for healing. I'm not saying I'm the only one that knows how to do anything. It's not the case. But no, it's never too late.
Well, you've gotten well over 1 million views on the original post, so we're not doing this for publicity per se, other than we're doing this more for information. But you took the time, so I want to give you the shout outs. Where can people find you online, on Substack, on X, on TikTok, on Instagram?
Yeah. So my main is X. It's living underscore energy, and that's actually my local wellness business that I run. And then I would say after that is Instagram, sunlightis.life. And Substack is Peter Anthony Cowan at Substack. And TikTok, sunlight.is.life. But I would say find me on Twitter. Everything I post goes through, or sorry, X. Everything I post goes through X. And then you can go to my website, sunlightis.life, and that's where my platform is. I've got some apps coming up. I've got a lot of things coming up, and just I hope to be able to share them with more people. And there's a lot of people who are not doing well in this world, and they could use some help getting better. And I'm trying to give them the tools to do that.
Well, listen, we appreciate you. We appreciate you getting back to us when we reached out to you. We appreciate the time you took here, and appreciate the work you've done on this in trying to inform folks.
Thanks so much.
Anything else that you want to address that we didn't address?
No, I think I pretty much covered all of it.
Okay, good deal,
Okay.
Peter. Really appreciate the time.